Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll get you top stories from India and the region. I am Tanvi Taneja, and for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in London, Ollie Barrett. Hi, Ollie.
Hello there, Tanvi. It's 12:30 p.m. here in London, 1:30 across Central Europe. Coming up in the next half an hour, we'll be live to Tel Aviv and to Moscow. And France says goodbye to one of its most famous actors. First, the headlines.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken meets Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to push for a ceasefire, says it's probably the best and maybe the last opportunity to get hostages home. Ukraine hits third bridge in Russia's Kursk region, claims to have repelled Moscow's overnight air attack, including on Kiev. And world on alert as a deadly strain of Mpox spreads to the Philippines. 13 African countries already hit, claims over 500 lives in Congo. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Tel Aviv again as a proposed Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal hangs in the balance. Secretary Blinken described the latest diplomatic push by Washington, D.C. as probably the best, maybe the last opportunity to get hostages home. In his meeting with Israeli President Isaac Herzog, the top US diplomat said Washington, D.C. was working to ensure that there was no regional escalation amid concerns over a possible attack by Iran.
This is a decisive moment, probably the best, maybe the last opportunity to get the hostages home, to get a ceasefire, and to put everyone on a better path to enduring peace and security. I'm here as part of an intensive diplomatic effort on President Biden's instructions to try to get this agreement to the line and ultimately over the line. It is time for it to get done. It's also time to make sure that no one takes any steps that could derail this process. And so we're working to make sure that there is no escalation, that there are no provocations, that there are no actions that in any way could move us away from getting this deal over the line, or, for that matter, escalating the conflict to other places and to greater intensity.
While thanking the ceasefire efforts of the United States of America, Egypt and Qatar, Herzog said there is no greater humanitarian objective and there is no greater humanitarian cause than bringing back the hostages home.
At the bottom line of it, people have to understand it starts with the refusal of Hamas to move forward. We are simply still very hopeful that we can move forward in the negotiations that are held by the mediators. And I want to thank the United States, Egypt, and Qatar for their efforts on behalf of this noble cause. There is no greater humanitarian objective and there's no greater humanitarian cause than bringing back our hostages home as they should have returned long ago.
Secretary Blinken also held a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem on his 9th regional tour since the Gaza conflict erupted. Israeli police and the Shin Bet Domestic Intelligence Agency have confirmed the bomb blast in Tel Aviv late on Sunday as a terrorist attack. The man carrying the bomb, which exploded near a synagogue, was killed and a passerby was injured, according to police at the scene. Sunday's explosion came about an hour after US Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived in Tel Aviv to push for a ceasefire in Gaza. Hamas's armed Al-Qassam brigades claimed responsibility of the bomb blast in Tel Aviv. DD India's Sarah Coates joins us live from Tel Aviv now. Sarah, how have Antony Blinken's talks with Netanyahu fared to push for a ceasefire?
Hello there, Tanvi. Well, this is really diplomacy in overdrive. This is a desperate situation, an urgent situation that the US Secretary of State really wants to see a ceasefire get through before the end of this latest Middle East trip. Still no word on exactly what has come out of this meeting between him and also the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu right now in Jerusalem. I'm sure we'll hear about that very, very shortly. But it certainly doesn't seem as though there's much hope, much optimism in this latest round of talks, given that Hamas seemingly rejected the US's updated proposal overnight. We do have a statement from Hamas saying, after being briefed by mediators about what happened in the last round of talks in Doha, we once again come to the conclusion that Netanyahu is still putting obstacles in the way of reaching an agreement and is setting new conditions and demands. Now, also last night, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, he held a very close meeting, a closed-door meeting with his senior advisors, cabinet ministers, reportedly telling them that the chances of achieving a deal are not high. We do need to remember these main sticking points here. One of these being who would control the Philadelphia corridor. This is this very narrow strip of land that separates Gaza and Egypt, with Israel adamant that it needs to control this strip of land to stop smuggling efforts from Egypt. But certainly this is one thing that's holding these talks up, with Hamas saying it never agreed to Israel being in control of this, and it simply won't. So certainly he's got a tough task ahead of him before flying to Cairo.
Indeed, very tough. Sarah, how is the situation in the northern front as Hezbollah and Israel traded cross-border fire today?
Just continues to escalate. Earlier this morning, Hezbollah claimed what it is calling a swarm of explosive-laden drones fired into Israeli territory, with the group saying that it was targeting an Israeli military base near Akko. Still no reports of any injuries, any deaths, but certainly this tit-for-tat just continues to escalate. Lebanon's health ministry has also come out over the last couple of hours to say that one of the latest Israeli strikes in southern Lebanon has actually killed 2 people. Still no clarification on whether these people belong to Hezbollah or whether they are civilians. But the death toll on both sides of this border just continues to mount, and so does the pressure on both sides really to get something into play and to stop these hostilities potentially developing into a larger scale regional war. And this, of course, is another one of the reasons that the US Secretary of State Blinken is here to really stop these hostilities escalating.
Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv, thank you for those updates. Staying in Asia, China's President Xi Jinping has held talks with Vietnam's new leader, To Lam, in Beijing on Monday. China and Vietnam inked 14 documents spanning cross-border railways to crocodile exports on Monday. The meeting between Xi and Lam signals the close ties between the two communist-run neighbours, which have well-developed economic and trade relations, despite occasional strains over their competing claims in the South China Sea. Next, on to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Ukraine's daring military operation inside the Russian territory rages on. My colleague Ollie Barrett is in London. He takes it forward from me here, gives us more on the conflict and other stories making headlines around the world. Ollie, a third bridge seems to have destroyed by Ukraine's military in Kursk now?
Yes, Tanvi, that is the claim that the Ukrainian Air Force is making today. We'll have more on that in a moment. We are now into the 906th day of the Russia-Ukraine conflict overall. Ukraine's air defense units repelled a Russian overnight air attack, including on Kiev. Ukraine's Air Force says all 11 drones that Moscow launched on Ukraine's territory were destroyed. There were no immediate reports of any damage due to the attack or falling drone debris. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky has been briefed by his top commander on new details of that operation in Russia's West Kursk region, and the Ukrainian Air Force claims, as we were saying, to have destroyed another strategic bridge over the same river in Russia's Kursk region. This has limited the supply capacity of a Russian group there opposing the Ukrainian advance. Kiev says it has seized more than 80 settlements in Kursk since launching a surprise strike across the border on August the 6th. Moscow says Ukraine has struck and damaged a third bridge in the Kursk region as Kiev forces attempt to expand the incursion within the Russian territory. Meanwhile, the Russian President Vladimir Putin is in Azerbaijan's capital Baku for a two-day visit. Vladimir Putin has held talks with his Azerbaijani counterpart Ilham Aliyev. They discussed the further development of bilateral relations, their strategic partnership, and other regional and international issues. Earlier, Putin paid tribute to the late Heydar Aliyev, first president of the post-Soviet Azerbaijan and the father of the incumbent leader. He also laid a wreath at the Eternal Flame memorial devoted to fallen Azerbaijani soldiers. Meanwhile, Russia's Ministry of Emergencies has released videos of showing civilians evacuated from the Kursk region amid the continued advance by Ukrainian forces into the border area. According to the ministry, the latest group of evacuees has been taken to the Saratov, Samara and Tambov regions. The government says more than 10,000 local residents are staying at temporary accommodation centres in other parts of Russia. Russian officials say nearly 200,000 people are being evacuated following the attack by Ukraine. And DD India's Dasha Chernyshova joins me live now from Moscow for more on this. Dasha, how much pressure is there on the Kremlin over Ukraine's incursion?
Well, there is a lot of pressure on the Kremlin indeed, because this incursion is almost 2 weeks old by now. The understanding is that more people are getting evacuated from the border regions. The recent numbers released from the Russian Emergencies Ministry suggest that over 120,000 people have been evacuated from the border areas of the Kursk region from 9 districts there. Some of them are getting evacuated themselves. Others are taken away by buses. They are later stationed with their relatives. Some have to rely on the accommodation provided by the state. But as this incursion is ongoing, the Russian Ministry of Defense says it continues to fight against the armed forces of Ukraine on the Russian territory, and also to strike the positions of the Ukrainian military in Ukraine's bordering regions. For instance, in Sumy, we understand this is where an Su-34 fighter jet has dropped an FAB-500 bomb earlier to destroy the concentration of the Ukrainian military as well as the military equipment. But again, you have to understand the scale and the disaster for the civilian population who lived in those border territories. They had to leave their livelihoods behind them, and some of the heads of the local municipalities there in the Kursk region have warned the residents against attempting to come back to their houses, saying that that was life-threatening and also interfering with the activities of the Russian military. In the meantime, we're also hearing that the Russian president has left the country at this particularly important juncture. He is on a state visit to Azerbaijan, but if you look at the statements coming from the military analysts here in Russia, they suggest the very fact that Putin has embarked on this trip, did not cancel his visit to Azerbaijan, shows that the Russian authorities are certain that the Ukrainian troops will be out of the Russian territory.
Dasha, thank you. The US Democratic Party's convention kicks off in Chicago on Monday. US Vice President Kamala Harris has arrived in the state ahead of the event. The main part of the convention will take place at the United Center, home to 2 professional sports teams in the city, the Chicago Bulls and the Chicago Blackhawks. Harris will address the convention on Thursday and enters the week boosted by a string of polls that appear to show she's redrawing an electoral map that was strongly favoring Donald Trump in the final weeks of Joe Biden's candidacy. At least one person is dead after a luxury yacht sank off the coast of Italy's Sicily. Search and rescue efforts continue for 6 missing people of British, US and Canadian nationality. According to Italy's Coast Guards, the luxury boat with a British flag sank with 22 people on board when it was hit by a violent storm. The Coast Guard and firefighters have rescued 15 people, including 1 child. Germany's Lufthansa Group has again extended its suspension of flights to Tel Aviv, Tehran, Beirut, Amman and Erbil. Flights are now going to be affected up to and including August the 26th at least. The group, which includes carriers Swiss International, Austrian and Eurowings, is also avoiding Iranian and Iraqi airspace over that period over fears of escalation in the Middle East. Newspapers in France have been paying tribute to late French star Alain Delon, who died on Sunday at the age of 88. Delon was known for playing murderers, hoodlums and hitmen in his post-war heyday, but he'd been in poor health since suffering a stroke in 2019, rarely leaving his estate in Douchy in France's Val de Loire region. Delon shot to fame in 2 films by the Italian director Luchino Visconti, Rocco and His Brothers in 1960 and The Leopard in 1963. In recent years, Delon had been at the centre of a family feud over his care. And with that, I'll hand back to you, Tanvi.
All right, thank you very much, Ollie. Ollie Barrett joining us all from London. You're watching DD India Global, still to come on the show. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim to arrive in India to boost multi-sectoral cooperation agenda. And it's World Photography Day. Camera enthusiasts worldwide showcase their creativity on the theme an entire day. Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. Updates from Asia Pacific now. Tension have escalated in South China Sea. China's Coast Guard said that a Philippine vessel that had ignored its repeated warnings deliberately collided with a Chinese vessel in an unprofessional and dangerous manner. In a statement issued on Monday, China's Maritime Security said that the same Philippine vessel then entered waters near the Second Thomas Shoal after being prevented from entering the Sabina Shoal waters. China's Coast Guard said it took control measures against the Philippine ship in accordance with the law and warned the Philippines to immediately stop infringement and provocation or bear all consequences. China and the Philippines reached a provisional agreement in July after repeated altercations near the Second Thomas Shoal. China has been sharply criticized by Western nations for aggression in blocking the Philippines' efforts to resupply troops aboard a Navy ship it intentionally grounded 25 years ago. Beijing claims almost all of the South China Sea, including both shoals, rejecting a 2016 ruling by the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague that Beijing's expansive claims had no basis under the international law. South Korea and the United States kicked off their annual summertime military drills on Monday, seeking to boost their joint readiness to fend off North Korea's weapons and cyber threats. The Ulchi Freedom Shield exercises set to end on August 29th come as North Korea races to advance its nuclear and missile programs and tries to launch reconnaissance satellites. The drills will reflect realistic threats across all domains, including the North's missile threats, but also GPS jamming, cyber attacks, and other lessons learned from the recent incidents, the two countries' militaries have said. South Korea will separately carry out the simultaneous government-led Ulchi civil defense drills under the scenario of a nuclear attack by the North. Seoul and Washington say that the exercises are defensive in nature and a response to North's threats. Meanwhile, the Philippines has detected a new case of the monkeypox virus in the country, the first since December last year, as per its health department. adding that it awaits the test results before being able to determine the strain. The patient is a 33-year-old Filipino male who had no travel history outside the Philippines. The World Health Organization on Wednesday declared Mpox a global public health emergency, its highest form of alert following an outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo that had spread to neighboring countries. The new form of the virus has triggered global concern as it seems to spread easily through routine close contact. Elsewhere in Africa, countries affected by the Mpox virus are ramping up measures to ensure that the virus is contained. The virus has so far spread to at least 13 countries on the continent, and the World Health Organization warns of a potential to spread even further. Sweden and Pakistan have also reported the cases, with the EU announcing a travel advisory to the affected countries. Isabel Nakiria has more in this report.
In response to the outbreak, affected countries in Africa have created incident management teams to step up preventive measures. Teams have been deployed at borders and at the airports to carry out testing and detection, contact tracing and increasing awareness to ensure compliance. Isolation units have also been set up at the borders where suspected cases are monitored as samples are taken for testing. Now, the World Health Organization says it's releasing $1.5 million in the coming days to respond to the emergency. The WHO is also speeding up the process of listing the vaccines available for emergency use. Countries in the global north have been urged to donate stockpiles of smallpox vaccines, which can also be used for monkeypox. Isabel Nakiria in Kampala reporting for DD India.
Malaysian Prime Minister Dato Seri Anwar bin Ibrahim will be on a 3-day visit to India beginning Monday. This will be the first visit of Anwar Ibrahim as the Prime Minister of Malaysia. India's External Affairs Ministry said that the Prime Minister of Malaysia will hold bilateral discussions with Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi on Tuesday. During his visit, he will also meet President Draupadi Murmu and External Affairs Minister of India, Dr. S. Jaishankar. Japanese Foreign Minister, I beg your pardon, Nepal's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Arzu Rana Dyoba, is in India on a 5-day official visit at the invitation of India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar. Both leaders held a bilateral meeting in New Delhi on Monday. The visit is expected to strengthen ties between the two countries and allow them to review progress in bilateral cooperation. And Japanese Foreign Affairs Minister Kamikawa Yoko arrived in New Delhi for the third India-Japan 2+2 Foreign and Defence Ministers meeting. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar will host the Japanese Defence and Foreign Affairs Minister for the third India-Japan 2+2 Ministerial Dialogue in New Delhi on Tuesday. During the bilateral talks and the 2+2 meeting, the ministers will review the bilateral cooperation and explore new initiatives to further strengthen the engagement between the two countries. The leaders will also exchange views on regional and global issues of mutual interest. Now, to boost its global pharmaceutical standing, the India Pharmacopoeia Commission hosted an international delegation of policymakers and drug regulators from 15 countries. The delegation's visit, part of the inaugural Policymakers Forum at New Delhi's Dr. Ambedkar International Centre, featured the launch of new digital platforms for pharmacopoeia and drug safety. India's Minister for Health and Family Welfare, J.P. Nadda, inaugurated the event, highlighting the country's commitment to enhancing the Indian pharmacopoeia's global recognition.
Our generic drugs help to treat diseases like malaria, HIV/AIDS, and tuberculosis, which are usually considered as health problems of the developing countries. And India is committed for the continued support for eradication of these disease conditions. This contribution underscores India's commitment to the global health and its responsibility in bridging the healthcare gap in the developing nations.
Next, an update on the Kolkata rape and murder case. The post-mortem report of the woman doctor of state-run R.G. Kar Medical College and Hospital in the eastern Indian city of Kolkata, who was raped and murdered on August 9th, has suggested that the body had several injuries. As per the post-mortem report, sources said that multiple injuries were traced in different parts of the body. The findings of the report suggest that the death of the victim was due to the effect of manual strangulation. The report also mentioned of sexual assault. So far, only one individual, a civic volunteer, has been taken into custody, whose polygraph test has been approved by the Sialda Court of Kolkata. As the investigation deepens, Central Bureau of Investigation has interrogated former principal of R.G. Kar Medical College and Hospital Sandeep Ghosh. India's top court has also taken suo motu cognizance of the incident. A three-judge bench presided by Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud will hear the matter on Tuesday. While the resident doctors of All India Institute of Medical Sciences in Delhi said that they will continue their strike, they have also decided to provide certain OPD services free of cost. And now let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. Firefighters battled huge wildfire in southern France that charred around 400 hectares of land. Authorities said the wildfire, which broke out in the town of Gigien in the Hérault department on Sunday, was under control and has stopped spreading as of Monday morning. A local team from Tunisia is putting in efforts to protect and restore an aquatic grass Posidonia oceanica from the challenges of climate change near the coasts. Known as the lungs of the Mediterranean, the local team planted 1,000 square meters for scientific experimentation on the Posidonia cultivation efficiency. A Saudi Arabian gamer, Ibrahim Al Nasir, has connected more than 400 consoles to a single TV in his gaming room, making a Guinness World Record. His collection includes classics like Metal Gear MSX, arcades and various plug-and-play devices. And the world is celebrating Photography Day today, celebrating all types of photography. The theme this year is an entire day, as it aims to capture and highlight different aspects of what happens around the world. World Photography Day is an annual worldwide celebration of the art, craft, science and history of photography. It commemorates the invention of daguerreotype in 1839, marking a pivotal moment in the history that revolutionized visual representation. World Photography Day encourages enthusiasts worldwide to showcase their creativity, share their perspectives and promote the universal language of images. Tajik-Russian singer Manizha, the last musician to represent Russia in the Eurovision Song Contest, has released a defiant anti-war track. Gun, a reworking of a track she wrote a decade earlier, was released late last month as a single. Let's all unite to sing for peace. That's all in this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles at DD India Live. And for those on the go, you can catch all the latest news and updates from India and the world on our DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. So we will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from my entire team here in New Delhi and elsewhere around the world. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.